You are standing on the deck in the middle of the North Atlantic. The air is freezing. The sea is black glass. No moon. No waves. No warning. Somewhere ahead, hidden in the darkness, a wall of ice is drifting toward the most famous ship in the world. But no one is panicking. Not yet. Because this is Titanic, the floating palace, the engineering miracle. The ship people believed was too powerful for the ocean to defeat, but Titanic did not sink because of one mistake. It sank because, over 24 hours, warning after warning and decision after decision stacked on top of each other, until one final piece was pulled out, and everything collapsed. At 2:20 a.m. on April 14, 1912, exactly 24 hours before Titanic vanished beneath the Atlantic, the ship was still alive. More than 2,200 people were aboard. Millionaires, immigrants, crewmen, children, newlyweds, dreamers. Some were traveling toward luxury, some were traveling toward work, some were traveling toward a new life. None of them knew they had just entered the final day. Titanic was 4 days into its maiden voyage from Southampton to New York. It had already stopped in France and Ireland. Now it was crossing the open Atlantic. On board, danger felt impossible. First-class passengers moved through grand staircases, lounges, smoking rooms, and dining halls that looked more like a hotel than a ship. Second-class passengers enjoyed comfort that rivaled first class on older liners. Third-class passengers had better accommodations than many had ever seen. Titanic was not just transportation, it was a promise that modern engineering had finally beaten nature. The ship had 16 watertight compartments. If water entered one section, steel doors could close and trap the flooding. That was the theory, but the theory had a limit, and the ocean was about to find it. By the morning of April 14th, Titanic was sailing toward ice. Other ships knew it. The radio room knew it, the bridge knew some of it. But knowing danger exists is not the same thing as treating danger like it is real. Wireless messages began arriving from nearby ships. They warned of icebergs, field ice, and pack ice across the North Atlantic. These warnings were not strange for April. Ice was expected that time of year. Captains knew the risk. But Titanic was not slowing to a crawl, it was moving fast, around 22 knots, nearly full speed. To modern ears, that sounds reckless. But in 1912, speed was prestige. Ocean liners were expected to keep schedules. Passengers wanted fast crossings. Companies wanted headlines. Captain Edward Smith was experienced and respected. This voyage was supposed to be one of his final crossings before retirement. After the ice warnings, Titanic's course was adjusted slightly south, but the speed did not seriously drop. That decision becomes heavier with every hour. Because the ship was moving into a known ice region, under a dark sky, on a calm sea, at high speed, and almost no one aboard felt the trap closing. By afternoon, Titanic was still calm. That may be the strangest part of the final day. Nothing looked like disaster. Passengers walked the decks, they wrote letters, they dressed for dinner, they admired the ship. First class enjoyed luxury. Third class passengers talked, played music, and imagined America. Life continued in layers. Above them, officers watched the route. Below them, stokers fed the furnaces. Inside the wireless room, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride were buried in messages. This detail matters. The wireless system was not only for navigation or emergencies, it was also a luxury service. Passengers could send personal messages across the ocean. And on April 14th, the radio room was overloaded. A technical issue had created a backlog. Phillips was trying to clear passenger traffic through Cape Race in Newfoundland, so ice warnings arrived into a room already under pressure. Some reached the bridge, some did not. Some were treated as urgent. Some became one more message in a crowded stream. This was not one villain making one evil choice. It was a system where danger could be real and still get buried under routine. Then, night fell, and the ocean created the worst possible stage. The North Atlantic became cold, still, and almost unnaturally calm. Survivors later described the sea as flat, like a mirror. That sounds peaceful. It was terrifying. On a rougher night, waves would break against an iceberg. White foam could reveal its shape, but this night had no breaking waves, no moonlight, no bright horizon, just black water under black sky. High above the deck, lookouts Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee stared into the darkness. They had been warned to watch for ice, but they were missing one famous detail: binoculars. The lookouts did not have them because of a last-minute mix-up before departure. Historians still debate whether binoculars would have changed anything. Maybe they would have helped, maybe not. That is the nightmare of Titanic. So many details sit on the edge of maybe. Maybe slower speed gives them time. Maybe binoculars help. Maybe one message reaches the bridge. Maybe one nearby ship responds. But history does not run on maybe. It runs on what happened. And what happened next was one of the most haunting missed warnings of the night. At about 9:40 p.m., the steamship Mesaba sent Titanic a warning. It described heavy pack ice, icebergs, and field ice in the area ahead. This was exactly the kind of information the bridge needed, but Jack Phillips was busy sending passenger messages. The Mesaba warning did not reach the bridge. A direct warning about dangerous ice entered the ship. It crossed the air, it reached the wireless room, and then it stopped. Not because it was wrong, not because the iceberg vanished, but because Titanic's system failed to turn information into action. Then came another warning. Around 10:55 p.m., the Californian, a nearby ship, messaged that it had stopped for the night because it was surrounded by ice. The Californian was close, so close its signal blasted into Titanic's wireless room. Phillips, still working passenger traffic, told the Californian's operator to stop interfering. Soon after, the Californian's wireless operator shut down for the night. That decision would haunt the story forever, because hours later when Titanic called for help, the closest ship would not hear. By then, the tower was wobbling. Warnings had piled up. Speed stayed high. The sea was flat. The night was moonless. A major warning never reached the bridge. A nearby radio went silent, and Titanic kept moving. At 10 p.m., First Officer William Murdoch took over the bridge watch. Murdoch was experienced, alert, capable. That makes the story scarier. Titanic's final hours were not simple chaos. The officers knew ice was possible. The lookouts had been warned. The bridge was active. It was worse than chaos. It was calm. Passengers settled in for the night. Some stayed awake talking in first-class rooms. Others returned to cabins. Third-class families slept below. Every minute Titanic covered more water. Every minute the iceberg came closer. Around 11:30 p.m., the lookouts noticed a slight haze ahead. Nothing clear, nothing certain. 10 minutes later, the darkness finally changed shape. At 11:40 p.m., Frederick Fleet saw it, an iceberg, directly ahead. He rang the warning bell 3 times and called the bridge. Iceberg right ahead. Murdoch reacted fast. Orders were given. Titanic began to turn, but the ship was too large. The speed was too great. The distance was too short. Titanic almost missed. That almost is the cruelest word in the story. The iceberg scraped along the starboard side, opening damage beneath the waterline. Not one giant gash, but a series of wounds. Many passengers barely noticed. Some felt a vibration. Some heard a grinding sound. Some even saw ice fall onto the deck and treated it like a curiosity. There was no instant collapse, just confusion. Then Thomas Andrews, the ship's designer, understood the truth. Too many compartments were flooding. Titanic could not survive. The ship was going down. Now the real disaster began. Titanic did not have enough lifeboats for everyone. It had 20, enough for about half the people aboard. And even that only mattered if every boat was filled properly and lowered in time. At first, many passengers did not believe they needed to leave. Why climb into a small wooden boat in the freezing Atlantic when the largest ship in the world still looked safe? Some lifeboats left partly empty. Crew members were uncertain. Passengers hesitated. Orders were interpreted differently. Women and children first became a rule, a moral test, and sometimes a wall. Class also shaped who reached safety. First and second class passengers were closer to the boat deck. Third class passengers had farther to go and less information. Distress calls went out. CQD, then SOS rockets were fired. Far away, Carpathia turned toward Titanic and pushed through dangerous ice, but it was too far away. Nearby, Californian sat stopped in the ice. Its wireless operator was asleep. Some crew members saw rockets in the distance, but the response was confused and delayed. That remains one of Titanic's darkest controversies. Could Californian have saved more people? Maybe. But on Titanic, debate no longer mattered. Only minutes mattered. The bow sank lower. The deck tilted. Confidence finally broke. People who had refused lifeboats now begged for seats. Families were separated. Children cried. Crewmen worked under impossible pressure. The band played as the ship leaned into the sea. By 2 a.m., Titanic was no longer a ship. It was a clock. The bow was underwater. The stern rose into the sky. Lights still burned, making the scene look unreal. A glowing palace breaking apart in the dark. Then the power failed. The ship split. The stern lifted higher, and at 2:20 a.m. on April 15, 1912, Titanic disappeared beneath the Atlantic. The ocean closed over it. The night became quiet again. More than 1,500 people were gone or would soon be lost to the freezing water. The lifeboats drifted in darkness. The survivors waited for dawn with sounds they would never forget. When the world learned what happened, Titanic became more than a disaster. It became a warning. Lifeboat laws changed. Wireless rules changed. Ice patrols were created. The idea that a ship could be too advanced to fail was shattered. But the most haunting part is this. Titanic was not lost in one moment. It was built toward disaster across 24 hours. A fast ship, a calm sea, a moonless night, a missing pair of binoculars, a warning that did not reach the bridge, a nearby radio that went silent, a shortage of lifeboats, a belief that the worst could not happen because it had never happened quite like this before. So pick a side. Was Titanic a freak accident, or was it a disaster assembled piece by human confidence? Because the iceberg may have struck the ship, but arrogance helped steer it there.